Education has played in your life, and as a leader, what you try to kind of carry forward with education, kind of in the role that education plays in a democratic society, perhaps.
Sure. I've always, the greatest influence in my life as it relates to education was my mother. At a very early age, I had the benefit of a mom who would read to me, read stories to me, sparking my, whatever limited amount of creativity I have in my imagination. And, as I got older and tried to do the same with my kids, I just saw the power of that, making that a core value in your life. And then as governor, as a candidate for governor first, and as governor, I made it really put it at the core of my, the political case I made to the voters of Florida that our system wasn't working for everyone. I mean, and kids were being left behind. We were 50th out of 50 in high school graduation rate. We had dismal numbers, particularly for low-income kids, and no one seemed to care. It kind of pissed me off, to be honest with you. I mean, that's not Florida's an aspirational place, and our country is. And if we have this attitude of lower expectations because of life circumstances, you'll get what it becomes self-fulfilling. So I've always believed that we should have high, lofty expectations for every child, and that we should organize ourselves in the best possible way to make those, those expectations come true. And so a whole suite of policies come from that. Part of which is to make sure that that you're college and or career ready. And if you are college ready, that you have access to a high quality higher education, which I think Florida's done a better job than some. It's been a struggle. It's taken a long time to get there, but I think we're, for in-state students, we have a pretty good deal for them. You have bright futures, you have performance funding for the universities. I'm not sure what your view on that is, but it's actually aligned the universities towards more of what they aspire to. Typically, hopefully all universities want to graduate, full-time students could graduate with a 4-year degree in 4 years. That would be a nice thing to happen more often. At Florida, that happens, almost every kid does that, which is pretty amazing. So there's been a lot of progress, but there's a lot more to be done. And in the world we're moving towards, it's a requirement to make sure that we're equipping the next generation with the skills to be able to rise. I mean, yes, our country really isn't good when we just are told to get in line and do this, do that from up above. We're not that, it's just not in our DNA. So to have a society where everybody has the chance to rise up, you need to tear down the barriers to make sure that they can. And education is probably the most important one. There are many others, but that's certainly the most important in my mind.
Yes, sir. Governor Bush.
Don't call me sir. That makes me feel old. Call me Jeb, please.
Okay. All right. Thank you. You call me Paul, please.
I'll call you doctor.
No, that's good. But if you don't mind me asking, Jeb, what were some of the obstacles? You mentioned Florida was 50th prior to your governorship. What were some of the obstacles that you had to kind of deal with and kind of think about challenging or overturning in order to move Florida in the direction it needed to move?
Well, there was a mindset that said the K-12 system, life circumstances made it impossible to, for the K-12 system to empower students. That the challenges socially, the society's challenges were so overwhelming, there's nothing we could do about it. So there was low expectations, low standards. I mean, when I was governor, we actually had a high school equivalency, a high school graduation test, which put us, I think we're probably one of 15 states maybe that had a high school graduation test, that was considered pretty, a pretty big reform, but it was an 8th grade level test. I mean, like, who's fooling who here? I went to visit 250 schools as a candidate in 1998, and you learn a lot when you go into the lion's den. I was not considered, I didn't get endorsed by the establishment of our K-12 system, which is comprised of school district personnel and teachers unions. Those basically have been pretty dominant in life at the school district level. I was considered a threat, I guess, to them. So I went to visit 250 schools to learn and to show that I didn't have horns, at least. So you learn a lot, though, when you do that. You learn about the struggles of what it is for teachers to teach a wide range of students with very different, levels of aptitude. But you also learn we had low expectations. I'll never forget, there was a kid named Freddie Santiago, who I asked afterwards whether he came newly arrived or was he, a lifelong Floridian. He was a senior. He needed to pass this HSCT test to go to college, or to graduate from high school at least. And the question, he was in a lab and he couldn't answer the following question. A baseball game starts at 3, it ends at 4:30. How long is the game? So this is a kid, 12 years, going through system, passed along. No high expectations. He could have been gifted beyond belief. I don't know if he was or wasn't, but there was an assumption that he wasn't, and no one paused and said, let's fix this. And the gaps grew, I'm sure. And he couldn't answer that question. Well, how's he going to get a job? How's he going to go? I mean, he wouldn't go to community college or a 4-year degree with those kind of challenges. So I just think there was a cultural acceptance of that. And to this day, there still is some of that, but a lot less. I mean, if you start with the premise that God's given every child the ability to learn, it's kind of up to us, everybody else, to organize ourselves in the best possible way, make sure they do. So, and in Florida back then, the low-income kids were the kids where that disproportionately was evidenced, this belief that kids could learn or couldn't. So, I think that's one of the great challenges of our time right now. And if the first step in improving the K-20 system is to make sure that kids graduate from high school, college, and or career ready. So we're doing a better job of that. There's still a long way to go. And then our colleges don't have to remediate. If 60% of community college students entering community college from high school have to retake high school math and high school English, who's fooling who again? I mean, that's a burden on a community college system that otherwise you could be focusing on careers. You could be focusing on getting the basic credits to go get a 4-year degree in the most cost-effective way in any state of the country. In our community college system, you get your 60 credit hours at Santa Fe College now, and then go to Florida. It's the best deal you'll ever get from government. I mean, but you got to have the skills to be able to take advantage of that. And that gap is really where I think our state needs to focus even more.
Right. Jeb, I wonder if you could kind of move us forward a little bit to the first time you met Bernie Machen and your impression of him in the beginning. So
Bernie replaced, I believe, President Young, who had the claim to fame, I think, of being the youngest university president in U.S. history, and maybe one of the oldest. I mean, he was president at UCLA for a long while, came to Florida to replace John Lombardi, who left under, I think, controversial circumstances, as I recall. And so he was there. And he really, no disrespect to the guy, because I'm sure he was, in his heyday, was a great leader. But I think he had lost a step or two. Let's just leave it at that. So President Bernie Machen comes in, and it's a breath of fresh air. First of all, he's like the norm. He's like, he's like a normal guy. He did ride a motorcycle, and he just had just kind of down to earth guy that you could relate to immediately. Not all university presidents, some of them think their titles and the pomp and circumstance kind of gets in the way. Bernie never was like that. And I think he was a breath of fresh air from that perspective. And we hit it off. I mean, personally, he was, I never asked him about his politics. I didn't really care. It's a hugely important institution in our state, University of Florida is. And to have a leader like that was really important at that stage of our development. I think he did a phenomenal job.
When did Bernie first approach you about this idea about helping first generation college students, and what was your initial reaction, if you could remember?
Yeah, my initial reaction was hell yes. Not just yes, hell yes. So you got to remember, one of the more controversial things I guess I did as governor was by executive order creating One Florida, which got rid of race and ethnicity as a criteria for admissions into our university systems, and eliminating quotas, set-asides, preferential pricing for procurement for minority business enterprises. It was very controversial, but it wasn't to. The point was that there's that minority students and minority businesses, as long as they had access to opportunity, they could excel. That we didn't have to have the stigma of the belief that there was one standard for one group at the expense of another. So in that process, it became clear, particularly University of Florida, which was lily white at the time, for several reasons. The excuse President Young used to give me, because I was on his case quite a bit, that was, well, highly qualified African-American students go to the ones that we would normally get, go to they're recruited by an Ivy League school. So we can't compete. And that's just wrong. It's not true. So thanks to the provost at the University of Florida, there were efforts made with state support and other universities participated in this, to create mentorships with urban high schools to be able to attract aspiring students. We created the first of its kind college board program to offer PSATs for every student, not just those that were told by their counselor they should take it. 15% of kids in DNF schools were taking the practice SAT, and 85% in the A and B schools in Florida were taking the practice SAT. And the excuse was, well, they're not qualified to go. And I said, let's give it the practice SAT to every student, and then expand AP programs, do these mentoring. College should mentor, high schools, identify aspiring students, and work on creating a race and ethnic conscious program, admissions policy, but not lowering standards. So the idea that Bernie suggested fits perfectly into that. And not only did I think it was a cool idea, we went to the legislature, we got sponsors, and we got state funding to jumpstart it, to accelerate it. And then Florida took it to a whole new level, with private support, and more importantly, the mentoring and all the elements of the program that I think are a great template for other universities around the country to embrace. I think this could be a phenomenal Florida export. Whether it's you think of all the emerging communities across our country where first generation students don't have the financial wherewithal to go, particularly in states with higher tuition. You're basically taking this incredible talent that would add so much value over the long haul for your communities, and giving them the opportunity to make big contributions. So it's been a godsend to Florida, but I think it could be just as important in many other parts of the country. And this is the template of success, I think.
Well, Jeb, now, looking back, of course, now we know that this has become an incredibly successful program. There's generations of alumni. You mentioned there's many private supporters now. It's got buy-in at all levels. But going back to the very beginning, when Bernie gives you the idea and you're thinking, oh, hell yeah, this is a great idea. We all know politics is complicated, right? So how did you sell this idea to folks in the state legislature? There must have been some skepticism. How did you deal with that?
That's a great question. I don't remember too much skepticism, to be honest with you. So in the aftermath of One Florida, there was big protests for sure. It was a difficult time politically because it was a controversial idea. But interestingly, it was done by executive order, not by legislation. No governor has changed it. So it's now kind of part of the state has embraced it. Minority contracting is up. Minority student representation is up. Now, part of that is due to just changing demographics of the state, for sure. But I think access to opportunity because of improving high school, academic results with bright futures, and then you add on top of that there are fewer barriers of entry for kids that otherwise would have been shut out. So at the time, I remember that the sponsor, Al Lawson, was one sponsor, a Democrat, and I believe there was a Hispanic, and I don't remember who the state House member was. Might have been Mario Diaz-Balart, or someone from Miami was the other sponsor. So it was a bipartisan effort to secure this financing. And if there was opposition to it, I don't remember it having that much effect. I don't know. Today, this would be considered, we're in such a hyper partisan time now. It might be different now than it was then. I guess even as a historian, I'm kind of fooled into thinking, well, things are so partisan now, it must have been partisan then, but maybe there wasn't incredible opposition, Yeah, no, I don't recall it. The One Florida initiative, the purpose of it was, in my belief, it was the right thing to do, but it was also to stave off what would have been a referendum by Ward Connolly from California. And I just felt like this is something that we could solve as Floridians and create a strategy to be able to deal with it. The net effect is, when California did the referendum that eliminated the ability to use race or ethnicity as a criteria for admissions, the number of Hispanic and African American students dropped pretty significantly. When we did the One Florida initiative, the number of African American and Hispanic kids went up. So there was a different approach. It was still controversial, trust me. I think I'm the beneficiary of the largest protest in Florida's history. On my State of the State address after One Florida, there were 10,000 people marching, expressing their disappointment and disagreement with my views. Which is great, it's all power to them. But we worked through these things because we created a strategy about dealing with the aspirations of people rather than precluding them from access. We figured out ways to do this in the right way. So, and the best example is the one we're talking about, I think, because it was a way to show it was conscious of the fact that there's a lot of people that don't have the same opportunities as others. And this was a way to eliminate a barrier for sure. And it disproportionately helped African American, Hispanic students for sure. All of which was, at least in my mind, was the right thing to do. But it didn't create, a lower standard for a group and create a stigma. So, I think what I saw with the Opportunity Scholars Program was that you created a community that was embedded in the university. It wasn't isolated. It was really an integral part of the university. You had the president of the university saying this is a high priority, which was huge. There was a nurturing effect of the building of this community. And the most gratifying part must be that the graduates that benefited from this are now making disproportionately higher donations back to the contributions back to the university, which is exactly the point. I mean, that's living proof that this policy is phenomenally important. And it continues to this day. And the state money, by the way, died after I left. So it was used as a catalyst, but beyond that, it's not a requirement. There's now philanthropy and university resources going to this, which shows that it is a priority. I'd love to see, by the way, I think this also could apply inside our university system in general. We talked about it working in Georgia and other places, and the fact that y'all are showing this as a template that others could use would be great. But it could work at University of Central Florida just as well. It's kind of spurred me on to be thinking about that again.
Very cool. Well, Jeb, when did you first realize that this was a successful program? You kind of walked us through the idea, the getting it through the state, but when did it first click and you're like, wow, this is going to work?
Almost immediately. It didn't take long for the demand to be evident. And the interesting part of this wasn't, these were kids that were qualified to go to one of the most difficult universities to get into as an in-state student in a public university in the country. I think Florida, correct me if I'm wrong, is ranked top 3 in the United States in terms of admissions, behind maybe Michigan and Berkeley, maybe a couple others. But for in-state students, this is not a slouchy thing to get in. Is incredible. And these were students that were qualified, but they didn't have the financial wherewithal to be able to take advantage of it. So there was a built-in demand for this, and it became clear immediately. I don't know if it was 300 students to start with. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think it happened pretty quick. And so it was valid, the idea was validated very quick. A lot of times good ideas take a while to percolate, you got to let the yeast rise, In this case, it happened very quick because this state particularly is a state of a lot of aspirational people, young people that haven't had the chance to be able to go to the University of Florida. Florida's, look, if you're from Miami, where I'm from, to go to Gainesville is like going to Des Moines. It's a long way away. Culturally, it's probably, not Des Moines, it's more like, I don't know, you pick your favorite Southern place. It's very different. And it's a long way away, and it's expensive to get, back and forth. And you've got housing issues and other things. It's a phenomenal university because it dominates a beautiful little town. It's a great experience, I'm sure, for students, but not everybody can afford it. Even with the low tuition or bright futures, you still have a lot of costs. So this was, that tore down that last barrier that made it possible for students that really wanted to get the best education they can.
Yeah. Well, Jeb, I think Adolfo and Marianne may have questions for you, but I'm thinking now, kind of jumping forward now to the present. And if you were an ambassador for what's now called the Machen Florida Opportunity Scholars Program, how do you sell this to a governor in another state or DC?
Yeah.
You know, how do you generalize this?
I think, well, first of all, for donors, for people that are, that want to support their universities, and there are a ton of them, having a name on your building, I don't think we need any more buildings. We may need a building here or there. We need to empower students. I think focusing on empowering students to be able to access the university is a far better return on philanthropy than having, a building named after you. So I would make the case that investing in the aspirations of young people is a pretty cool thing to do. As it relates to a governor, I'd say, look, my experience in politics and policymaking is you want to be in the intersection of good policy and good politics. Tricycles go through that intersection, not Mack trucks. You're not going to get run over, you're not going to be roadkill. And in this environment, they're hard to find. There's not a lot of places where there is broad support for an idea. And I think this is one of those. So if you're in a state, Florida has a large immigrant community, population. And now we are blessed with young people emerging as leaders in our state because 20, 30 years ago, their parents may have come to our country, right? Well, Georgia and North Carolina are now on that path, maybe 15, 20 years behind us in some ways. And so you have this emerging group of people. What better way to show your support for the aspirations of a large and the fastest growing segment of your population than to create a version of what the University of Florida did? I mean, I think it's great politics and it's phenomenal policy combined. And there's some places where great policy is worth fighting for, but you're going to have a political fight on your hands to do it. This is a place where there'll be broad support. I think more people are tired of pushing people down to make, they're tired of the grievance kind of culture that has emerged. They're tired of the zero-sum game environment that we're living in, where someone has to be pushed down for you to gain. It's so un-American. And if you can find ways where everybody wins because you're lifting people up, I think there's broad political support for that these days. So, and plus, the other side of this is there's business support for this, because workforce, we have huge shortages of qualified workers, of skilled workers. We don't have shortages of people desiring those jobs. We have a skills gap that needs to be filled. And part of the way you do that is to make sure that students that can get a four-year degree get it. It's not the only way, but it's still a very important way, or a master's for that matter, or even a PhD. What the heck?
What the heck? Exactly. Well, Adolfo and Marianne, do you have questions for Jeb?
Sure, of course. I do have a question, Jeb. So personally, how has the program impacted you? What does the program mean to you at a personal level? Why are you doing all this work? You're so involved with higher education. Where did that stem from? Like, what made you say, like, I need to get involved in this? This is a priority. This is a number one issue that needs to be talked about and discussed.
Yeah, I think I'm still involved in education issues because I think it's the single most important way that we can give young people, the tools to be successful in life. And 20 years ago, when I was governor, I started, 22 years ago or something like that, 23 years ago, I got elected. It was important, but now it's exponentially more so, because the jobs of the future require higher skills. And so it's just, I feel like I love my state. I was proud of my service, public service. And I think one of the legacies that I'd like to see be enhanced by current leaders is to make sure that we have the most cost-effective way for young people particularly to rise up. And there are other things that can happen along the way that can make that happen. But if you don't have a high quality pre-K to 20 education system, where more and more kids, I mean, look, if 60% of full-time students graduate with a 4-year degree in 6 years, that's not good enough. And there are lots of reasons why that happens. But the financial elements of this should not be the reason. That should not be the reason. There should be, we ought to be much more creative in making sure that people's aspirations are not deterred because they don't have the money to be able to go to school. So programs like the Opportunity Scholars Program are phenomenal success stories that I'd like to see be expanded across the state for sure.
Do you still remain involved with Machen Florida Opportunity Scholars Program at the side, or how much involvement do you have currently?
I'm a donor. Someone named a scholarship after me, which like I try to avoid having my name being named for things. I think, I don't know. I'm not I like trying to help. I don't need to have names, but I'm really honored that I get my little report on how the students that are taking advantage of the scholarship that was funded, I think, by a lot of my colleagues that served with me when I was governor. It's a nice gesture. So I'm involved on the periphery in that regard. And I'm a donor myself from time to time. But other than that, I'm not that actively involved. But this conversation and seeing your oral history conversation with Bernie got my juices flowing again for sure. In fact, if you do, when you get this put together, if there's, I'm more than happy to share it with other governors across the country and others, but maybe that's a place where I could make an additional contribution.
That's wonderful. That's exactly what Leslie Pendleton, and Bernie, and that's such great news. Thank you.
That's easy to do. Plus I'd be bragging on my state, which I like doing.
Exactly. Mary Ann, did you have a question for Jeb?
Sure. You briefly mentioned that one of the patterns that you and others had noticed was that Black and Hispanic students would sometimes choose to go to Ivy Leagues instead of public universities in Florida when they were being recruited. And I was wondering, what in general is your philosophy on the land grant institution, and how do you see our imagination or our understanding of the land grant changing as we try to push this type of program forward in Florida and outside of Florida?
Yeah, I think it was the idea was a justification of why Florida couldn't have a diverse student population back then without lowering standards. And I just, to me, it was a bogus argument. So, and I think the university has proven that now. It's, it's got to be a high priority, not just for a short period of time, but it's got to be an integral part of the strategy of the university to make sure you have your land grant university in, an important state. The student population should be reflective of the overall population to be effective. And so as long as it's a high priority and there are programs like this and others, it's not to say that you rest on your laurels. There could be other ways of achieving, a successful admissions policy that allows for everybody to participate. That's important. I think that fulfills the mission of a land grant university. Look, Florida's a phenomenal university in so many ways. And the idea that you can't compete with other universities, even if they've got a highfalutin, reputation, that's just bull-ticky. It's just, there's so many things that the university can offer that those so-called, great universities don't. And it's not just the football team, by the way, although that needs to get a little better. It's the full life, campus life. It's the research that is world-class. It's the, it's the whole package. High quality professors. University can compete with anybody. And so I remember, here's the deal. When we moved to a board of trustees at the University of Florida, away from board of regents, so each university now has a board that is effectively responsible for the strategy of the university. The university, I think this was done when Bernie was there, may have been right before him. I think it was done when he was there. They created their first strategy, had 10 different, the aspiration was to be a top 10 public university in the country. I think the university's probably achieved that. And there were, I think, 10 different criteria to measure that. And they started with one that was already achieved, which was the caliber of the entering students. So, if you start with that, you ought to be able to build the rest of it, in my mind. If you start, and then, over time, that cadre of students has become more diverse, which I think is important as well. So that's fulfilling the mission that's been established for, more than 100 years of what a land-grant university is supposed to be doing.
Exactly. Marianne or Adolfo, any other questions for Jeb?
By any chance, have you worked with other universities outside of UF? And I guess my question is, why did you choose UF? Did you try to talk to FIU, other universities within the state?
Yeah, no, I talked to UCF, USF, FIU. I recall, I don't remember if there were other universities. It was the fact that this idea originated at Florida. It was embraced by the leaders of the university. The need might have been greater. I mean, FIU's, given its location, had a significant Hispanic and African American, probably maybe the number one university in the country in terms of African American Hispanic graduates, if you combine it on a nominal basis, at least, because it's a large scale university. So there was a perception perhaps that there wasn't the need. Miami College plays that role in Miami, more maybe than Santa Fe College does. So this was driven by the University of Florida. Having said that, I still think it's something that could be really useful for the universities, other universities in our system. FSU would be a phenomenal place for this. This could be built out as well. I know the president there. I'm going to call him.
Good.
When are you going to have this thing ready, by the way?
Well, Jeb, we are, the plan is, right now our undergraduate interns are actually interviewing current students in the program, in the Opportunity Scholars Program, and alumni who you mentioned earlier. And so we started in the fall, of course, interviewing Bernie, General Dave Kratzer, and some of the early kind of institutional leaders. And the idea is to begin production at the end of this semester and to roll out the documentary in time for the National First Generation College Student Day. And as you said before, to really say, hey, this is what we've been able to do in Florida, and we want to share the story. Bernie and the alumni are our best ambassadors, right? They're the alumni of the program are constantly sharing the story about the success of the program. When we hope that the documentary can play some part in that. And so, kind of next steps is we'll give you a recording of this interview. We will transcribe it. We'll give you a copy. You can look over and make any corrections as you see fit. And then we'll keep you updated on the progress of the documentary. But I'm guessing we go into production kind of when the semester ends and we get through finals. And then at that point, we can put together this story involving, the different generations of people who made this program a success.
Great. Fantastic. Well, you can edit out the bull ticky thing.
Right.
Well, you can maybe keep that one. The other one, take out the first one that I don't think I edited myself.
Okay, well, anything you see in that transcript, you're
I'm cool. I'm way past worrying about stuff like that.
okay. Well, and now you know how to get a hold of us. So any questions you have is
Yeah, I mean, once it's put together, I'm happy to send it out to. I mean, I could send it out to every governor if you like.
Yes, please. That would be wonderful.
We'll talk about that when we get closer to the launch date.
Okay.
You know how to get me.
Okay. Yeah. All right, Jeb. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for the great work.
Yes, thank
Mary
you.
Ann and Adolfo, good luck to you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Stay in Florida, please.
Will do. Will do.
All right.
All right. Have a wonderful day.